My name is Tessa Lockwood, and I'm 33 years old. If you walked into my life on a random Tuesday night, you'd probably think everything looked normal. Engagement ring catching the TV light, takeout containers sweating on the coffee table, my fiancé's socks half forgotten on the rug, 3-year relationship, 4-month engagement, 1-bedroom apartment with our names on the mailbox. Well, technically, my name on the lease, our names on the cheap little brass label. From the outside, it's quiet, stable, boring even. From the inside, it feels like drawers. That's how I think of it. Some people pin their life story to their sleeves like name tags. Hi, my parents got divorced. My first dog died. My ex cheated on me. Please handle with care. I don't work like that. My life lives in compartments. This drawer is childhood. That drawer is college. Another is labeled family, fragile. I open them when I need to. I close them when I don't. Most people only ever see the top of the dresser. The night everything started, we were slumped on the couch, working our way through Pad Thai and some forgettable streaming show with explosions and witty one-liners. I had noodles wrapped around my fork, halfway to my mouth, when Grayson picked up the remote and muted the TV. The sudden silence felt louder than the gunshots that had been echoing a second earlier. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I paused, fork hovering. "Sure." He turned toward me, elbows on his knees, eyes sharper than his tone. Grayson has this way of looking at you, like he's reading subtitles you didn't know were there. Do you ever feel like we don't really know each other? I set my fork down. What do you mean? We've been together 3 years. I know, he said, but you never talk about yourself. Not really. I frowned. I talk about myself. No, he said softly, like he was trying not to spook me. You talk about logistics, your schedule, work, in bullet points. You ask how my day was. You listen. You're supportive. But when I ask about you, I get headlines. It's like there's this whole part of you I'm not allowed to see. I felt something in my chest tighten. Not quite panic, not quite anger. A reflex, like reaching for a drawer and finding someone else's hand already on the handle. I'm just private, I said. Always have been. Grayson's jaw flexed. He searched my face, looking for something I didn't want to name. It's more than that, he said. You're too quiet, Tess. It's weird. Sometimes I feel like you're hiding a whole life from me. I looked at him for a moment. The smart, reasonable answer would have been something soothing. A joke. A reassurance. The version of me he liked. Steady, unbothered, easy. Instead, the truth slipped out sideways. Maybe, I said. He blinked. Maybe? What does that mean? It means maybe I am. His mouth fell open a little. Are you serious right now? I shrugged, picked up the remote, and unmuted the TV. You said it, I murmured. I didn't. For a long, brittle 10 seconds, he just stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Then he grabbed his phone off the coffee table and stood up. Tessa. What? I kept my eyes on the flickering screen, heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. He didn't answer. I heard the soft thud of our bedroom door closing. Not slammed. Grayson doesn't slam doors. The controlled kind of shut that says this isn't over. He didn't come back out for the rest of the night. I sat there with the empty containers and the noise of the show filling up the space where our conversation should have been. I wasn't trying to be mysterious. I wasn't playing some cool girl game. I just don't spill. Not my default setting. Some people walk around with their history hanging off them. I keep mine folded away. It's not malicious, it's just how I'm wired. But he was right about one thing. There is a part of my life he doesn't know about. Not because I'm hiding it, I tell myself, just because it never came up, and I never felt the need to drag it into the light. By the time I turned off the TV and brushed my teeth in the silent bathroom, I could feel the weight of that drawer beating like a second pulse behind my ribs. The next morning, Wednesday, Grayson was already in the kitchen when I got up. He stood at the counter, hands wrapped around a mug like it was keeping him anchored to the floor. His shoulders were tight, his back a straight line. Morning, I said, reaching for a glass. Hey, his voice was flat. He didn't look up. I poured water, took a sip, watched steam curl from his coffee. You okay? I'm fine, he said immediately, which, translated from human to actual, means I absolutely not fine. I thought about pushing, asking what fine meant in his universe. Instead, I checked the clock, did the math on my commute, and decided that maybe we both needed space to cool down. It was easier to pretend the tension was a passing weather system instead of a pressure front moving in. I've got an early meeting, I said, grabbing my bag. We can talk later, okay? He nodded without really nodding, eyes still fixed on the swirling coffee. I went to work. I had my meetings. I sent emails, gave updates, answered questions. All day there was this low hum under my skin, like a fluorescent light about to flicker out. By the time I came home around 6, the sun was slipping behind the apartment buildings, turning the windows into dark mirrors. Grayson was at the kitchen table with his laptop, screen glow painting his face pale blue. No music, no TV, just the quiet click of keys. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys in the bowl by the door. "Hey," he didn't look up. That was it. No, "How was your day?" No smile. Just a syllable hanging between us like a frayed rope. I opened the fridge, pulled out some leftovers, mechanically put together dinner. "You want anything?" I asked. "No thanks." His eyes stayed on the laptop. I ate alone at the counter while he typed. The distance between us was maybe 6 feet and about 1,000 miles. Around 8, he finally closed the laptop with a soft, decisive snap and turned to face me. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," he started. My stomach did a slow, uneasy roll. "Okay." "Are you actually hiding something from me?" he asked. "Or were you just being sarcastic?" The air felt thick. I leaned back against the counter. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters." His voice sharpened. "We're supposed to get married, Tessa. How am I supposed to marry someone who won't even be honest with me?" I set my fork down carefully. "I've never lied to you. Not telling me things is the same as lying." "No, it's not," I shot back. "You're not entitled to every single detail of my life just because we're engaged." His face flushed, a quick wash of red across his cheekbones. "Entitled? You think I'm being entitled for wanting to know who I'm marrying?" "I think you're making this into something it's not." He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the tile. "You know what? Forget it. Grayson!" He grabbed his laptop, walked to the bedroom, and this time the door didn't just shut. It slammed. The sound echoed through the apartment and settled somewhere in my chest. I stared at my half-finished plate, appetite gone. Part of me felt guilty, like I'd kicked a puppy. Part of me was angry, because I was not some puzzle he was entitled to solve on his timeline, just because he put a ring on my finger. I'm not an enigma. I'm just a woman who doesn't overshare. Why was that suddenly a crime? The night stretched on long and quiet. I washed dishes that didn't need to be washed, scrolled my phone without seeing anything. Kept catching myself glancing at the bedroom door like it might open if I stared hard enough. It didn't. Behind it, my fiancé was probably cataloging every story I'd ever not told, every time I'd said, "It's fine," instead of opening a drawer and letting him see the mess inside. He didn't know it yet, but the drawer he'd just rattled the loudest was labeled family, and once that one opens, you don't get to close it neatly again. Not for him. Not for me. Thursday morning, my alarm went off, and for a second, I forgot we were in a cold war. Grayson's side of the bed was already empty, sheets smoothed back like no one had slept there at all. I could hear the shower running, the muffled thud of the cabinet door in the bathroom, normal sounds, familiar. They just felt hollow. I pulled on a sweater, scraped my hair into a ponytail, and walked into the living room as my phone buzzed on the coffee table. My brother's name lit up the screen. For a heartbeat, I just stared at it. That drawer, the one labeled family, do not open. It hummed under my skin. I answered anyway. "Hey," I said, dropping onto the edge of the couch. "What's up?" His voice came through light, a little breathless. "Just checking in. Wanted to let you know I hit 2 years clean yesterday." I exhaled, tension I didn't realize I'd been holding easing out of my shoulders. "That's great," I said. "I'm really proud of you." "Thanks." I could hear him smiling. "Couldn't have done it without you, Tess. Seriously, you bailing me out, letting me crash at your place that year, getting me into rehab. I don't think I ever really thanked you properly." "You don't need to thank me. You're my brother." "I know, but still, most people would have written me off. You didn't." I tucked my legs under me, eyes wandering around the living room, the wall where his air mattress had been, the corner where his duffel bag had slumped like a tired animal. Same apartment, different life. "How's work?" I asked. He launched into a story about his job, about a girl he was seeing, about how things were finally looking up. I listened, picturing him in some bland break room, coffee in hand, the weight he used to carry finally a little lighter. "We should grab lunch next week," I said when there was a pause. "My treat. We'll celebrate 2 years. "Deal," he said. "And for real, Tess. Thank you. For everything." We said our goodbyes and I hung up, thumb hovering over the dark screen for a second longer than necessary. A warmth spread through me, a mixture of pride and relief. Then I turned around. Grayson was standing in the hallway, bag on his shoulder, keys in his hand, completely still. My pulse lurched. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. His eyes were pinned to my face like he was trying to decide if I'd just hallucinated in front of him. "Long enough," he said finally. His voice sounded wrong, flattened, like someone had pressed all the air out of it. "You have a brother?" The question was so basic it stunned me. "Yeah." "You never mentioned a brother." "It never came up," I said, hearing how weak that sounded the second it left my mouth. His expression shifted, something like disbelief flickering underneath the shock. "It never came up?" he repeated slowly. "He said you let him live with you," Grayson went on, "that you helped him get into rehab. When was that?" I swallowed. "About 4 years ago, before we met." 4 years ago. He said it like he was doing long division in his head. "So you had a whole situation with your brother, addiction, rehab, him living here, and you just never thought to mention it at any point in 3 years?" The backs of my ears burned. "It's his story, not mine," I said. "I didn't think it was my place to share." "I'm your fiancé, Tessa," he said quietly. "I live here. How did I not know someone else used to live in this apartment?" "Because it was before you moved in," I snapped, more defensive than I meant to sound. "It's in the past." He just stared at me for another long, unbearable moment, like he was looking at a stranger who happened to be wearing my face. Then he shook his head once, sharp, and stepped past me. "I'm going to be late," he said. "Grayson." He opened the door, walked out, and let it close behind him with soft finality. No slam, just a quiet click that somehow hurt worse. That night, he didn't come home. Around 9, my phone buzzed with a text. "Staying at Matt's, need some space to think." My thumb hovered over the screen. Every response I could write sounding either too needy or too cold. I deleted 3 drafts and finally sent, "Okay, take the time you need. I'm here when you're ready to talk." The message showed delivered and then nothing else. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and stared at the empty chair across from me. In my head, I tried to reduce this to something simple. Miscommunication, timing, an overreaction to a story that didn't matter anymore. But another part of me, the part that knew exactly why I'd never volunteered my brother's history, or the way my mother had shattered our family, whispered, "You did this. You've spent your whole life fixing other people's disasters and pretending your own never happened. Now someone is asking to see the wreckage and you're offended." The apartment felt bigger without Grayson in it. Every echo a reminder that he was somewhere else, probably replaying that phone call in his head, realizing his fiancée had an entire chapter of her life he'd never even heard of. I slept badly, if you could call it sleep. Every time a car door slammed on the street below, my body jolted, expecting his keys in the lock. They never came. Friday, he walked in around noon. I was working from home, laptop open on the table, pretending to read the same email for the 3rd time. The door opened, and the sound sliced through the quiet like a blade. He dropped his bag by the wall and sat across from me, hands clasped in front of him. No kiss. No, "Hey." Just a long, steady look. "We need to talk," he said. I closed my laptop. "Okay." He inhaled once, like he was bracing for impact. "I've been thinking about this whole thing," he said. "About you, about us, about how you keep parts of yourself locked away." My throat felt scratchy. "Grayson, And I realized something," he cut in. I shut my mouth. "I don't actually know you," he said. The words landed with a dull, heavy thud. I almost laughed, because how do you spend 3 years sharing a bed and a bathroom and a grocery list with someone and not know them? "I know the version of you that you let me see," he continued. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, honed. The polite, supportive, easygoing woman who remembers my coffee order and listens to my rants about work. But there's this whole other side of you. He gestured vaguely around the apartment, as if the walls could confirm his story. "The side that helped your brother through addiction. That let him live here. That dealt with something hard and heavy and never once mentioned it. That's not a small thing, Tessa. That's a huge part of who you are, and I had no idea." My fingers dug into the edge of the table. Like I said, it wasn't my story to tell. "But it is your story," he snapped. "You lived it. You were affected by it, and you chose not to share it with me. Why?" "Because if you knew how messy my life really was," some ugly, old voice in my head whispered, "you'd run." Out loud, I said, "Because I didn't want you to see me differently." His brows drew together. "What does that mean?" "People hear addiction and start making assumptions," I said, staring at a knot in the wood grain instead of his face. "About my brother, about me, about my family. I didn't want that hanging over us. I wanted you to judge me based on who I am now, not something that happened years ago." He shook his head slowly. "That's not fair to me, Tess. You don't get to decide what I can and can't handle. You don't get to curate this perfect version of yourself and hide all the messy stuff." "I wasn't trying to be perfect," I muttered. "I was trying to be normal." "But you're not normal," he said, the words punching out harder than he meant. His eyes widened, and he softened his tone. "You're not a blank slate. You're a person with history, with complications, with family drama. And I deserve to know that. I deserve to know who I'm marrying." Silence pressed in around us. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car horn blared and faded. He looked tired. Not just didn't sleep tired, bone tired. The kind of tired you get from carrying a question around too long. "What else haven't you told me?" he asked quietly. My head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, and now his voice was almost gentle, which somehow hurt more. "If you can keep a brother from me for 3 years, what else is there? What else am I going to find out about because I accidentally overhear a phone call or run into someone from your past?" "There's nothing else," I said quickly, too quickly. "I don't have a secret family or some hidden life. I'm just private." "Private is one thing," he said. "Secretive is another." We sat there, the word hanging between us like a verdict. Secretive. I wanted to argue, to build a case line by line about how my silence was self-preservation, not deceit. But the truth was, somewhere along the way, those two had blurred. He rubbed a hand over his face. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted finally. Cold washed through me. "Do what?" "Plan a wedding with someone who won't let me in," he said. "I've been trying for 3 years, Tess. Asking questions, sharing my stuff, waiting for you to meet me halfway, and you just keep putting up walls. I'm tired." The worst part was I could see it, in the slump of his shoulders, in the way his voice frayed at the edges. He really was tired. "So what are you saying?" I asked, even though I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. "I'm saying," he replied, "that if this is going to work, something has to change. I need to know if you're actually capable of being open with me. Really open. Because if you're not—" He trailed off, eyes closing for a second. "I don't think this is going to work." His words didn't explode. They seeped into the cracks, under the doors of all the drawers I'd nailed shut. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about a phone call or a brother or an old story I'd refused to tell. This was the beginning of a choice. Keep everything locked up, or learn how to hand someone the keys and hope they don't burn the place down. The days after that conversation didn't explode. They dissolved, quietly, slowly, like sugar melting into hot water until everything tasted different. Grayson didn't break things off. He didn't move out. He didn't throw the ring on the table or demand answers I wasn't ready to give. He stayed, physically at least. Emotionally, he hovered at a careful arm's length, like someone trying to examine a fragile object without touching it too hard. And maybe that was worse, because now I could feel the distance instead of just suspecting it. For the next few weeks, I forced myself to do something I'd never done in any relationship, not even the ones that ended so catastrophically I swore I'd never try again. I opened drawers. Not all of them. Not the ones I hadn't dusted in years or the ones with sharp edges, but I cracked a few open, not wide, but enough for him to see there was something inside. I told him about my childhood. Not the polished, divorced parents, it's fine, lots of people go through that version. I told him about the night my mother threw a wine glass at the wall and how the shards reflected the kitchen light like little stars. I told him about my father disappearing into a second marriage 3 states away. I told him how I learned at 12 years old to measure my emotions in decibels because raising my voice meant raising hell. Grayson didn't interrupt, not once. And when I finally lifted my eyes and looked at him, he didn't look horrified. He looked sad. For me. For that version of me who had to grow up fast and quiet. And I hated how much that look made something inside me soften. I told him about why I don't trust easily. Why vulnerability feels like offering someone a match in a room full of gasoline. Why I listen more than I speak. Why I ask questions instead of volunteering answers. I even introduced him to my brother, properly this time. We met at a little diner near his apartment. My brother shook Grayson's hand, joked about his terrible coffee, and told the absurdly sanitized version of rehab that people who haven't been through hell prefer to hear. When my brother excused himself to take a call, I braced for Grayson to say something about how proud he was of him or how he couldn't believe I'd done all that alone. Instead, he said, "You must have been terrified." I didn't answer, but the silence between us wasn't the cold kind. It was warm, heavy with truth. I wasn't used to that. Things improved, some days more than others, but the crack was there. I could feel it when he looked at me a second too long, when his brows pulled together as if he was waiting for something else I'd forgotten to mention. A person, a story, a ghost from some drawer I'd never opened. We tried to pretend it wasn't affecting us, but small things felt bigger now. A misplaced tone, a question asked too casually, a pause that lasted half a beat too long. Everything had weight. The night it all came crashing down wasn't dramatic. No shouting match about trust or secrets. No cinematic outburst. It started with a grocery list. We'd gotten into a stupid argument about budgeting, about how I tended to handle it all myself and present him the finalized plan like a quarterly financial report rather than something we could talk over. "I want to feel included," he'd said, "not like a guest in your systems." I snapped back that someone had to be organized, and maybe if he remembered to pay a bill on time, I wouldn't feel like I was carrying the entire financial load. That landed harder than I meant it to. He went quiet, too quiet. Then he said, "This is exactly what I'm talking about. When things get hard, you shut down. You retreat. You leave me out here alone." "I'm not retreating," I said, heat rising in my cheeks. "I'm trying not to start a pointless fight." "Every time you pull away," he said, "it feels like punishment." My eyes widened. "That's not fair." "But it's what it feels like," he insisted. "You've built your whole life around staying in control, and the second something doesn't fit inside your neat little drawers, you shut the whole dresser." "That's not true." "Tessa," he said quietly, "we've been here before. You disappear when things get uncomfortable." I crossed my arms. "I don't disappear." "You go still," he corrected, "which is worse, because I never know what you're thinking." The words lodged under my skin like thorns. "You want to know what I think?" I asked, voice trembling with frustration. "I think—" But the sentence disintegrated. My throat closed. My brain scrambled to find a safe, polished version of the truth. Nothing came. And I froze, the way I always freeze. Grayson saw it. He'd seen it 100 times before. He went very still. Then he said, with brutal calmness, "I think we should postpone the wedding." It felt like the room tilted. My stomach dropped so fast I nearly lost my breath. "What?" The word came out small. "We're not ready," he said. "Or rather, I don't know if you're ready." My fingers curled into fists. "You're calling off the wedding because I'm private." "I'm postponing it," he corrected, "because I don't know if you know how to let someone in. Not fully, not enough to build a marriage on." I opened my mouth to argue, to say something, anything, but the air felt too sharp to breathe. Every defense I reached for crumbled. He looked at me with the softness that hurt worse than anger. "Tess," he said gently, "I love you. But I can't be the only one opening doors." I didn't have a response. Not one that wasn't defensive. Not one that wasn't stitched together from fear and old wounds. So I said nothing. And in the silence, he nodded, like he'd just been handed confirmation he didn't want. "We'll talk more tomorrow," he said. But we didn't. Because the next day, some other drawer blew open. One I didn't even know was still locked. 2 months after we postponed the wedding, something happened that hit me harder than any argument Grayson and I had ever had. My mother reached out. 5 years of silence, and suddenly an email. Not a long one, just enough to upend everything I thought I'd buried. She said she was sick. Not dying, but sick enough that she wanted to make amends before things got worse. I read the email 3 times. Then I deleted it. No hesitation. No trembling hand. Just delete! And then I put my laptop away like I hadn't just reopened a wound so old it should have been scar tissue by now. I intended to pretend it never arrived. But life, my life specifically, has never liked staying in its drawers. Because that night my brother called, and he had news I never saw coming. My brother rarely calls twice in 1 week. Once he reaches his emotional quota, milestones, check-ins, the occasional meme, he retreats like a cat who's decided you've gotten enough affection for the month. So when his name lit up my phone again that evening, I knew something was wrong before I even answered. "Tess," he said, breathless, "did you get the email from Mom?" My stomach clenched, hard. I gripped the edge of the counter. "Yeah, I got it." A beat of silence. And what? "Are you going to respond?" "No." "But she's really sick, Tess," he insisted. "She means it this time. She wants to make things right." I closed my eyes, the words scraping old scar tissue. She said that before. She said that after the divorce. She said that when she apologized for the things she screamed at me. She said that when she blamed me for taking Dad's side, even though Dad left all of us. Each apology was followed by another knife. "I'm not doing that again," I whispered. "I can't." He exhaled sharply. "Look, she asked about you, about the wedding. I told her it was postponed." My blood went cold. You what? I didn't think it was a big deal. It is a big deal, I snapped, heat rising behind my eyes. I don't want her in my life, not even through updates from you. She's our mother. She stopped being mine a long time ago. Tess? I'm hanging up. I didn't give him a chance to argue. I hit end call and stared at the phone screen until the reflection of my own strained face blurred. The apartment was quiet in that way that feels like a warning. And then the front door opened. Grayson stepped inside, shaking off cold air, unwinding a scarf from his neck. The moment he looked at me, he froze. What happened? He asked. His voice was so gentle it nearly broke me. For once, I didn't say it's nothing. For once, I didn't swallow the story and put it in a drawer. Instead, I exhaled and told him everything. The email, the sickness, the 5 years of silence, the cruel things she'd said during the divorce, things about loyalty, about being ungrateful, about me being the reason the family fell apart, the way she'd called me dramatic for crying when Dad left, the way she'd told me I was too much work, too hard to love. Words I hadn't said out loud in half a decade spilled out like poison, finally finding air. Grayson blinked. Once, twice. Then he sat down and listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, without anything but quiet attention. When I finished, my hands were shaking. He leaned forward. Tessa, why didn't you ever tell me any of this? I shook my head helplessly, because I didn't want it to define me. But it does define you, he said softly. Not because you want it to, because it shaped how you love, how you fight, how you protect yourself. I stared at the floor, blinking back tears I refused to let fall. This is what I've been trying to explain, he said. You can't pick and choose which parts of your life you share when the ugly parts are the ones that built you. My jaw clenched. I didn't want you to think I was broken. He reached across the table and gently took my hand. Tess, he said, being hurt doesn't make you broken. I swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. It feels like it. He rubbed his thumb over my knuckles. I need to be honest with you. I can't be in a relationship where I keep finding out huge pieces of your life by accident. It makes me feel like you don't trust me, like you're preparing me for the parts you think I can handle instead of letting me see the truth. I'm trying, I said, hating how small I sounded. I know, but this is bigger than trying. You need help with this. Real help. For a moment, I thought he meant him, that he wanted to fix me. But that wasn't it. You need therapy, he said gently. Someone who can help you open those doors without feeling like the room will collapse. A part of me wanted to shut down, to fold inward, to retreat into the familiar safety of silence. But something else, some tiny stubborn thread of hope, pulled taut. Okay, I whispered. His eyes widened slightly. Okay? I'll go, I said. If it means we have a chance, I'll go. Relief washed over his face so honestly it hurt to look at. And maybe for the first time in weeks, I felt like choosing honesty wasn't just an obligation. It was a lifeline. Therapy began the next week. I sat in a small office with soft lighting and an overwatered plant in the corner, wondering how someone could possibly unravel 33 years of emotional habits in 50-minute increments. My therapist, Dr. Renner, was quiet at first. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made me suspicious. So, she said, after I finished giving her the glossy, surface-level version of my life story, that's the resume. Now tell me the parts you left out on purpose. I blinked. I didn't leave anything out. One more try, she said gently. I stared at her. She stared back. Something cracked. Not fully, not dramatically, just a hairline fracture. I told her about the drawers, about my mother, my brother, the years of being the stable one. The cost of pretending stability doesn't have weight. She didn't take notes, didn't interrupt, didn't look impressed or horrified. She just asked, who taught you that you had to earn being loved? My chest tightened. No one. I mean, my family was complicated, but, she nudged. I swallowed. I guess I learned early that love had conditions. And emotional honesty? She asked. Condition or risk? I didn't hesitate. Risk. She nodded knowingly, like she'd been expecting that answer all along. Then, she said, we're going to work on building a version of you who can survive being known. I didn't understand then what she meant, but I would, sooner than I expected. Because therapy wasn't the magic fix I secretly hoped it'd be. It was the beginning of opening the drawers I'd spent my whole life keeping locked, one by one. And every drawer had something sharp inside. Therapy wasn't a staircase. It wasn't even a path. It was a demolition site. Some days, I left Dr. Renner's office feeling lighter, like I'd finally loosened the knots that had been tightening in my chest since childhood. Other days, I walked out feeling skinned, hollowed out, like I had opened a drawer and found not memories but knives. But I kept going, partly because I knew I needed it, partly because every session felt like a test of the one promise I'd made to Grayson. I'll try. I want you to tell me about the moment you realized emotions were dangerous, Dr. Renner said during our 4th session. I don't think I ever thought they were dangerous, I replied. Tessa, I sighed. Okay, maybe I realized it when I was a kid, 10 or 11. My mother came home late. I was upset because she missed my school event, and I cried. She looked at me and said, "If you react like this over everything, no one will ever take you seriously." What did you learn in that moment? That feelings are inconvenient. And what else? That they make people angry. And what do angry people do? My throat tightened. They leave. She nodded slowly, which means letting people see your emotions feels like giving them a reason to walk away. That landed with a force that made my eyes sting. I stared at a crack in the floor tile until the feeling passed. And Grayson? She asked. What part of him scares you most? That he'll see the ugly parts, I whispered, and decide I'm not worth the trouble. And what part of yourself are you most afraid to show him? The parts I haven't forgiven myself for. Such as? My mother, I said quietly. My brother. The way I tried to be the stable one but resented it. The way I cut people off instead of telling them they hurt me. The way I leave the room emotionally when things get hard. She didn't interrupt. And the truth? My voice weakened. The truth is, I don't know how to be loved without conditions. Not really. I keep thinking if someone really knew me, they wouldn't stay. That sounds like a belief you learned, she said gently, not a fact. But it felt like a fact. For 33 years, it had been a fact. Opening up to Grayson wasn't neat or cinematic or easy. It was messy. It was awkward. It was terrifying. But I tried. I told him about my mother's worst nights, the screaming, the manipulation, the guilt that lasted years. I told him about my brother's overdoses, the fear that stayed in my bones long after he went to rehab, the way I slept on the floor next to his mattress because I was afraid he wouldn't wake up. I told him things I hadn't said out loud since I was a teenager. Sometimes I could only get out one sentence before I choked. Sometimes I spoke for 10 minutes straight and then had to curl up and cry. He didn't judge me. He didn't rush me. He didn't try to fix me. He just held my hand like it was something steady, something tethering, something that wouldn't break under the weight of what I carried. And it wasn't perfect. Some nights when we argued, I still froze. Not because I didn't care, but because that instinct to retreat into myself ran deeper than muscle memory. It was instinct. Survival. But Grayson began to recognize it. Tess, he'd say softly, stay with me. 2 words. Stay with me. Not talk to me. Not tell me everything. Not, why are you shutting down? Just stay. Being asked to stay instead of explain cracked something open I didn't know was possible. One night, after therapy, I sat with him in bed and told him about something I'd never admitted to anyone. I have a habit, I said quietly, tracing patterns on the blanket. Whenever something good happens, I try to find the part that could fall apart, the part that could hurt me later. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. It's not paranoia, Tess, it's conditioning. But it's exhausting, I whispered. For me. For you. He kissed my forehead. We're learning. Both of us. For a moment, I let myself believe him. Little by little, the crack in our trust stopped widening. It didn't disappear, but it didn't spread like a fault line anymore. It became something else, a reminder that intimacy wasn't automatic. It had to be rebuilt board by board, nail by nail. Some days I made progress. Other days, my instinct to withdraw won. But I kept trying, and he kept staying. 6 months after the wedding was postponed, something happened I didn't expect. We were lying in bed late one night, the room dim and warm. Grayson's hand rested loosely around mine, our fingers laced. You know, he murmured, I've been thinking about the wedding. My breath caught. What about it? I don't want to postpone it anymore, he said. I want to set a new date, one that feels right, one we can actually walk toward. My chest tightened, this time not with fear, but with something that felt like relief wrapped in hope. You really think we're ready? I asked. I think we're trying, he said. Both of us, and honestly, that's more than I ever expected. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I shifted closer, resting my forehead against his shoulder. Okay, I whispered. Okay, he echoed. Just like that, we weren't standing still anymore. We were moving again, cautiously, together. But setting a new wedding date wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of something harder, something I'd avoided my whole life. Choosing to be known, not halfway, not with conditions, not through curated versions of myself. Completely. Because the final drawer I'd been avoiding, the one marked mother, was about to open. And this time, I wasn't opening it alone. We chose a date in early autumn. A year away, small, intimate, just close friends and a few family members. Not the 120-person banquet hall my mother once insisted a proper daughter should have. Not the Pinterest-perfect wedding that used to make my stomach tighten with dread. Something quieter, something honest, something that felt like us. But as soon as we set the date, another email arrived. My mother, again. This time the subject line read, "Trying one more time." I almost deleted it unopened. Almost. But therapy had planted something in me. A stubborn, unwelcome seed of curiosity. A whisper that said, avoidance is still a wound. It just hides better. So I clicked. Her email wasn't dramatic. No manipulative guilt. No flowery apologies. Just a brief update on her health. A few mundane lines about her days, and then, "I would like to talk when you're ready. Even if ready means years from now. I hope you are well. Love, Mom." That last line made my throat close. I had spent years pretending I didn't need it, pretending I didn't care, pretending that if I ignored the ache long enough, it would soften into something harmless. But that's the lie people tell themselves when they don't know how to forgive or how to hurt out loud. That night, Grayson found me on the couch, laptop still open, my hands motionless on the keys. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, even though I wasn't. She emailed again. He sat down beside me, close enough that our knees touched. "Do you want to talk about it?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't even know what I'm allowed to feel." "You're allowed to feel whatever comes up," he said. "None of this comes with rules." I exhaled shakily. Then, because I had promised myself I would try, I opened the drawer, the one I had sealed shut for half a decade. "I think I want to write back," I said. He squeezed my hand. "Okay." Not good, not you should, not finally. Just okay. Like it was safe, like I could step into the unknown without him trying to force the landing. So I wrote, not forgiveness, not absolution, just honesty. I'm angry, I'm hurt. I needed you, and you weren't there. I don't know what this means yet, but thank you for reaching out. Tessa. I reread it a dozen times before sending. When I finally hit send, it felt like dropping a stone into a deep lake, the kind of drop you can't take back, the kind that ripples outward whether you want it to or not. Her reply came 2 days later. Short, gentle. I understand. Thank you for your honesty. I'm here whenever you're ready. For the first time, the words didn't twist in my chest. They just landed. Not like knives. More like a door unlocking somewhere far down a hallway. The months that followed weren't easy. I continued therapy. We continued couples counseling. Some sessions were breakthroughs. Others felt like emotional excavation. Grayson learned how to see the signs when I was pulling inward. The way my shoulders stiffened. The way my voice flattened. The way my eyes scanned the room for an exit even when I wasn't moving. And instead of saying, "You're shutting down," he'd say, "Tess, stay with me." And I would, even if it took everything I had. Especially then. One night, while folding laundry on the bed, Grayson asked a question. So gentle, I almost missed its weight. "Do you regret it?" I looked up. "Regret what?" "How everything happened," he said. "All the secrets, the fights, the postponement." I sat back against the headboard, sock still in my hand. "If I had been different," I said slowly, "if I'd been more open from the start, it probably would have saved us a lot of pain." He nodded. "Probably." A soft silence settled. Then he asked, "But do you think you could have been different back then?" I opened my mouth, closed it, thought. "No," I admitted. "I wasn't ready, not then." "And now?" he asked. And now the drawers weren't slammed shut. Now, someone else's hand was on the handles with mine. Now, I wasn't terrified of being known, just cautious, hopeful. "Now I'm trying," I said. He smiled, the kind of smile that feels like light cracking through a ceiling. "And that's enough," he whispered. In therapy the next week, Dr. Renner asked me what had changed the most since all this began. I didn't have to think long. "I used to believe that keeping things hidden protected me," I said. "That if I stayed small and quiet and controlled, no one could weaponize my pain." "And now?" she asked. "Now I understand that hiding didn't protect me," I said. "It just kept me alone." She nodded slowly, her expression soft. "And connection?" I smiled faintly. "Connection is risk, but it's also the only way to build something real." "So which path do you choose now?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "The one that requires showing up," I said. "Fully, even when it's terrifying." Her smile widened. "Good. That's the version of you who can love and be loved without conditions." The closer we got to the new wedding date, the more I realized something surprising. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being hurt, not of being seen, not of someone knowing every complicated part of me. And maybe that was the real story all along, not the secrets or the fights or the revelations, but the slow, terrifying, beautiful process of learning how to hand someone the keys to the drawers you thought would stay locked forever. Because the version of myself I had been protecting wasn't real. She was a facade, a shell, a carefully curated silhouette designed to keep people close enough to not be lonely, but far enough to not get hurt. But that's not a life. That's just survival. And I was finally choosing to live. With the man who chose to stay. With a family I was learning to face. With a past that no longer dictated who I had to be. I didn't have all the answers. But now I wasn't pretending to. I was figuring it out, one drawer at a time, with someone who knew the truth